Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. Well, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That's where you're going to be able to find big time on CBS, as it's going to be Penn State heading to the Coliseum to go take on USC. The Trojans licking their wounds a little bit coming out of a disappointing loss at Minnesota. Penn State continues to rise in the rankings, continues to remain right in the thick of the Big Ten conference race. So let's focus on the team that needs some work, Tom. What does USC need to do to very quickly address a myriad of issues and prepare for welcoming one of the best teams, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country?
It needs to figure out a way to get a lot better on the lines of scrimmage in a hurry, because I know that they faced Michigan a few weeks ago. I'm telling you right now, the Penn State team that they'll be facing on Saturday, when you put it together, both their offensive and defensive lines, is better along the lines of scrimmage than Michigan is. And if you watched that USC loss against Minnesota last week, one of the more alarming things to me was, like, the run defense did a pretty solid job against Michigan. It gave up the explosives, but overall it was stout. Last weekend against Minnesota, they were getting pushed around a little bit. And I look at this Penn State offensive line, who I think has been phenomenal so far this season in both the run and passing game. I look to them. They're going to be a very difficult challenge for this USC front, which has lost bodies in recent weeks, with guys like Barrett Alexander deciding to opt out and redshirt the rest of the season. Whether you think he's a superstar or not, he is still depth, and it's beginning to show that they're missing that depth for USC has not been a good thing. So that is going to be a key area of concern if I'm USC. And then on the other side, as far as protecting Miller Moss, listen, man, this Penn State defense is phenomenal. Like, they have dudes on the defensive line. They've got Abdul Carter. They are able to get pressure on you without blitzing, whether that is with Carter or Zane Durant, Filbert Smith, Danny Dennis-Sutton, all these guys. And then when they do blitz, they do an incredible job of disguising it and bringing defensive backs in who have also been very effective blitzers when asked to do so. Like, this is not a fun test for any offense or quarterback to figure out. And if you look at what Miller Moss has done this season, I mean, it's not a shock, but he has been far less effective when he's under pressure. His completion percentage drops considerably, and his interception rate has more than doubled. So USC really needs to figure out a way to keep a clean pocket for Miller Moss to find his big-bodied receivers down the field, and hopefully they can make some plays for him. But if they can't, even at home, it could be a pretty long day for the Trojans.
We've seen exactly how much they miss Caleb Williams now that their offensive line is back to not playing, awesome like it did against LSU. And I think, like, that's the real key takeaway. Minnesota's D-line is nothing special, y'all. And they gave USC fits. Like, if that's a major red flag if you're a USC fan right now. Like, Minnesota has been pushed around by a whole lot of teams this year, defensive line-wise. And USC was like, oh, man, these guys are pretty good. I'm like, no, they're not. You know who is? Penn State. Denied Dennis-Sutton, Abdul Carter off the edge. They've got to solve for that and solve for that now. I think there's some hope. Right? Penn State's DBs are not quite as good as they were last year. We saw USC effectively use some of the screen game, some like the screen and shot game against LSU in that opener. They tried some against Michigan. Didn't work quite as well, but they can always maybe go back to that. They need an unreal performance from their defense, at least relative to expectation. And as Tom mentioned, all those defensive linemen who've been missing, I think they miss Eric Gentry a ton too at linebacker. Like, Gentry played his butt off in some of those early games and papered over some of the mistakes. USC's, I didn't think their defense was going to be as good as it played in the first couple of weeks of this season, but I'm pretty sure I'm back to where I thought it was going to be now that they have some of these guys out. So they're going to have to pull one out here.
Yeah, and I thought because after you lose to Michigan, heartbreaking fashion, give them a pass for the first half against Wisconsin when they're trailing. That's sort of the hangover game. But that hangover lasted, even despite that comeback from behind win against Wisconsin. You thought maybe they should bounce back. Like, that should have been the wake-up call. They couldn't get anything going. Lack of big playmaking ability, too. And a lot of that comes with Miller Moss running for his life most of the day. But they only had 2 plays over 20-plus yards, and they were both rushes, one from Woody Marks and one from Quentin Joyner. Longest pass play of the day was only an 18-yard completion to Mekhi Lemon. So an offense which traditionally has been a big playmaking type of offense where you get those guys and you scheme them wide open, they were either not there or didn't have time to get them there. So I thought that was something that was exposed somewhat that they're going to need to get against Penn State. I totally agree with you guys. if they don't protect Miller Moss, he is not the type of quarterback that's dynamic enough that can get outside and extend plays and make pockets. He's adequate, but he clearly is not the playmaker that Caleb Williams was. So I think if you're USC, you're looking at this on the opposite side and saying, man, this defense, which has been probably a pleasant surprise, how are they going to hold up against Penn State's offense, which I think all of a sudden, if you're a USC fan, you're kind of hoping that you can contain them, because I don't know if you're expecting to put up many points.
All right. So for the Penn State side of this, Danny, how would you, obviously at running back, we've had some injury issues. The offense as a whole seems to still really rely on that ground game. We have seen more explosives, but what about Drew Aller? What about Penn State's offense, Drew Aller going into this environment in the Coliseum? How have you seen that Penn State offense evolve since Andy Kotelnicki came and took over?
Is it crazy to say it's different, but it's a lot more of the same too? I mean, remember last year, Drew Aller was, statistically really strong. The touchdown to interception ratio was great, very similar to where it is this year. I think he's been more consistent, as evidenced by his completion percentage, maybe a little bit accurate, but I still wonder where this big playmaking capability is at. Is that going to evolve to a place where all of a sudden they're this explosive offense? Because I still don't look at them in the same light that you look at Ohio State or some of the other more prolific offenses in the country, which I think is specifically the reason they brought in Kotelnicki. So I'll also, I wonder too, if they have something in there. Nick Singleton being back, I think will be a huge boost to this run game, but I still would like to see Drew Aller take that next step for working the ball vertically down the field. Still really haven't had that explosive firepower that I thought we were going to get. And some of that might be in the lack of an emerging wide receiver. We've talked about that. Where's the Julian Fleming transfer portal move going to pay off? That hasn't exactly paid its dividends, but I still look at the receivers as a group that doesn't exactly strike a lot of fear in many opposing secondaries.
Agree with you on that, Danny. I think Fleming's probably a bust for them, at least relative for the purpose taken. He can't be a receiver one in the Big Ten. Harrison Wallace is going to have to step up. I'm going to go back to the Illinois game. Penn State had an incredibly good success rate and just got shoestrung tackled on 6 or 7 runs. Illinois did a great job making sure a run was 12 yards and not 70 yards. Can they hit a couple of those explosive runs? Last week, that whole team looked like they had the flu or something. They were just kind of playing a little bit slower. I think they knew UCLA was not truly a threat to win that ball game. So if they can continue to have a good success rate like they did against Illinois, the stats say eventually 1 or 2 of those will bust out in explosives. Kotelnicki will probably be able to scheme one open, and they should be okay. But this definitely could be a dogfight.
Again, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, so that you can check out Penn State at USC. You can watch it on America's Most Watched Network, the network of stars, CBS. You can stream it on Paramount Plus. Well, coming up on the other side, I know it seems crazy in early October, but the Big Ten title race is underway. We might have some potential elimination games for the Big Ten title race. We'll let you know what's at stake next.